Hello and welcome back. In the last section, we looked at protecting our application here from a user integration angle. So right now, if you want to perform some action that needs protection, then we have the login and logout feature introduced here. So essentially from a UI angle, the app is protected. However, we also saw that our APIs are protected, okay? And if we had to create a user using our APIs, right now it doesn't essentially have any security measures in place. So we need to have those security guardrails in place in order for us to make sure that nobody can just walk in and create users willy-nilly in our system, right? In order to do that, let's head over to the Auth0 documentation here. And in here, it actually gives us some interesting information or quick start material in terms of how to protect our APIs. Okay, so there is some interesting information here as well as you scroll down, and essentially we've used these domain and client ID props already, and then they're actually asking us to use the audience props. Essentially you had to create the audience in the Auth0 dashboard and use it in here in the Auth0 provider, okay? And yes, in here he is given the example of I think the management API, which is kind of built in. So if you go in here, if you go to applications and APIs, the management API is already it comes built in to our Auth0 account, okay? But for us, we are going to be building our own set of APIs and essentially regulate access to those APIs, okay? All right, so let's go back to the quick start here again. And in here, he also gives some information about how to set up an API and also get the audience value, right? Let's click this and open it in a different window. And inside of here, it just says go to the dashboard, application APIs, and select create APIs, and you can go ahead and give this information and get started. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go over to my dashboard here, and I'm going to say create API, and I'm going to say this is going to be API-Indie Cafe, okay? And what's going to be the endpoint? I think we have the claims URI here. I want to make sure it doesn't necessarily clash with that. So let me get the code base in here. And inside of the .env, we have the claims URI. Actually says indiecafe/claims. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say HTTP. Again, this is not a universally or accessible URL. It's just a kind of a namespace identifier. Okay, so I'm just going to say API-Indie Cafe. Okay, super. So with this in place, and I'm going to maintain RS-256 because it's going to be a public key, private key signing algorithm that's going to be used. We're not going to be using HS-256 here. Okay, we'll be using our signing using the private key of the certificate, that's essentially given by Auth0. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and create. All right, so after that, let's see what we can do here. I think it actually opens up this window, and inside of here, it actually gives some interesting information about what to do next. Okay, so he has given some code in terms of how to integrate on the API side. So if I go to the Node.js part of it, so essentially this is the code that we can use, all right? So for each API, which needs to be essentially protected, we can create a middleware like this, JWT check, and we have already seen that, Auth0 uses JWT or JSON Web Token extensively for the purposes of authentication. So they use different libraries here, and Express itself has a built-in or a library for JWT here, and this is again for verifying our signatures, okay? And this essentially gives access to all of our keys, key repository here, okay? So we'll take a look at that sometime soon. But first thing is, we have to go back and go forward and see, what else can we do here, okay? And you can also define the permissions here for the API itself, and you can give the permissions directly or through role-based access. Okay, so let's head over. Let's scroll up here, and inside of settings, there isn't much here. I think I would need this identifier, of course. I'll go ahead and copy this, and I'll come back to this a bit later, all right? And then the permissions as well, we'll come back, and then we'll come back to this a bit later. And there is also this machine-to-machine applications. Essentially, this is for communicating between two machines, essentially B2B, so kind of stuff, okay? And in here we can define different permissions, all right? And there are no permissions right now. We can go ahead and add the permissions. I should be able to show up here. And if you go to the test, it actually gives us a token, apparently, which is the access token itself. Okay, that's what they say here. And for the kind of settings we have, it actually gives different access tokens here. Okay, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to go ahead back to our FE project, the front-end project, and try to integrate this with this setup with our front end. All right, so let's head over back to the code base, and inside of here I'm going to define a new variable, and I'm going to call this essentially React-app, and this is going to be audience or something like that. Auth0 audience. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense there. Auth0_audience, and that's what we are asked to create, right? And yeah, if you go back here just to make sure we are absolutely sure about that. Okay, so this is actually Auth0 audience. If you go back to the settings here, this is the audience identifier that I'm talking about. Okay, unique identifier, and this is going to be the audience parameter on authorization calls. I'm going to copy this one more time and go in here and paste it. Okay, super. And with this in place, what we're going to do now is essentially go over back to the config.js file, and I'm going to say const, define one more variable here, const audience is equal to, this is going to be process.env and React Auth0. Yeah, super, I think. And in here, I'm going to come right down, and I'm going to define another if block and check for whether the audience is actually set up or not. If it's not set up, then we're going to be throwing this error here. Okay, let me go ahead and copy this and put this in here. I'm going to say this is actually going to be the audience. Okay, super. And let me go ahead and export this as well. I'm going to say audience, export the audience. And let me head over to index.js, because that's where we need to essentially, not this index.js, it's going to be a different index.js. It is the main index.js, so to speak. Yeah, this is the one, right? This is where we're configuring our Auth0 provider, right? And essentially that's what the documentation also says, apparently. Yeah, if you look here, that's what they're configuring. Okay, super. So I'm going to head over back to here, and I'm going to go ahead and import audience. All right, and let me go ahead and get rid of this. Yeah, audience is defined but never used. That's okay. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of restructuring here, because right now there's way too many parameters, and I'm getting a feeling it's only going to grow over a period of time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to define a new variable, and that's going to be called provider config. Okay, and that's going to be an object. I'm going to say domain is going to be equal to domain, client ID is equal to client_ID, and I'm also going to say audience is equal to audience, right? And finally, the redirect URI is going to be window.location.origin. Okay, super. So we have the provider config here, and all we need to do right now is, instead of providing individual props like this, we can just pass the provider config here, and we can just say destructure it using those 3 dots, right? And say provider config. Super. So this is looking good right now. And the only thing that we need to do though is we need to restart this in order for us to essentially go ahead and make use of this, because we made a change to .env, and that's not going to be, and our create React app is not going to essentially monitor that and reload the configuration for us. Okay, so hard reload is not going to be possible here. So before we go ahead and do that, what we're going to do though is we'll quickly do something here inside of app.js. And the next step obviously is to get the access token. And let's quickly head over to the documentation one more time just to understand what they say about it. So if you want to go here, they are getting another method here from the use Auth0 hook, which says get access token silently, and they use that to get the access token, right? So where are they doing that? I think they're calling it somewhere, I'm sure. They're not using it anywhere, interestingly. I'm sure they'll be using it here. Yeah, I think this is the one, okay? They're passing the audience directly, but I'm essentially passing that through the Auth0 provider, right? So, and the scope, I'm not going to be using this because I have a different API for which I have configured my application. This is essentially the management API scope. I don't want that, okay? Super. So let's head over back to our code, and inside of here I'm going to head over to the app.js class, and in here I'm going to say get access token silently. Let me go ahead and save that. And after this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say do a console log here, okay? Let's do a console log of access token. And in fact, if it's authenticated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const token, okay, await get access token silently, super. And I'm just going to go ahead and console log this thing, okay? Let's see what we get there. Control Alt L, got lucky this time, super. So let's now kill this and start all over again, and hope that it actually doesn't break anything. I'm going to say npm start all over again, and let's see what happens. All right, we're back online, and in here what I'm going to do though is let me check if the console actually resulted. We are not signed in yet, so user is not authenticated, okay? So what I'm going to do next is essentially sign in here, okay, and sign in as Jane, right? And let's see what happens. Okay, it's actually asking me for some permission, asking me to get my profile and email. I said I'm going to accept it. All right, this is again the Auth0 and OpenID Connect in action behind the scenes, okay? And I'm going to say accept it. All right, super. Jane is now authenticated, and let's see if we got any kind of access token at all here. Super, I think we got the token here, which is the access token. This is not the ID token, by the way. The ID token is right here, okay? And this is the access token. So let's go ahead and parse this. And if I go ahead and essentially copy this stuff and head over to the JWT debugger, paste it in here, and there we go. We have our basic access token here, which we can use in our API interactions, and our API should be able to essentially look at it and say, okay, this is actually a valid request because I'm able to verify the token using the public key that's been provided here. Super. So we have made some progress here, guys. This is great. So essentially, I will explain what some of these things are. This is the key ID, and we also have the other stuff which we saw here, essentially in not here, I think, yeah, the settings, or is it the quick start? Yeah, the quick start of Node.js. Essentially, this will have, the JSON file will have that KID or the key ID, okay? And from there, it is going to be able to fetch the key ID, and from the key ID, it'll be able to get the public certificate and for this domain, essentially, and make sure that the signature is valid. So let's take a quick pause here. And when we come back, we will actually do a couple more things on the client side, and we'll also see how we can send it to our API. And post that, we have to, of course, make sure that the API is able to validate the token using this particular code snippet here. So let's take a quick pause here and come back and get going on the next steps.